and when the previous person has broken down, they will then move the bones into an area that is either at ground level or just below ground level. Good morning, everyone. It is a lovely Wednesday morning, and it's almost about 8 o'clock. It's about just past 7:45, and today we'll be going to the St. Louis Cemetery number 1, which is currently the oldest cemetery in the city, though one did exist here in the French Quarter prior to that. So anyway, join us on our journey. Day 3 in New Orleans was really cool, and there was a lot to see, but the highlight of our day was seeing St. Louis Cemetery number 1. Now, before we even went to the cemetery, we decided to get breakfast. So we went over to Cafe Beignet, and that's on Royal Street. Now, there's a more larger and famous Cafe Beignet, which is on Bourbon Street, and it's located in a garden. But I think the original, which is the one we went to, is on Royal Street over by the old Louisiana courthouse. Now, that Cafe Beignet looks like a small French cafe. And in fact, we were trying to figure out what kind of building it was built into, because it seemed kind of like it could have been a horse stable at some point, or maybe a carriage house. Either way, it was really finely decorated, it looked really nice, and it appeared as though it was some kind of French bakery that you might find somewhere along the streets of Paris or something. It was really wonderful. And when we went inside, I ordered a order of beignets, which of course you have to get at Cafe Beignet, and I also got a mocha. We're here at Cafe Beignet, about to eat some delicious food. I got a crawfish omelet, and then some really huge beignets. It's gonna be sweet. For those that don't know, beignets are little French donuts. They're basically just a donut with powdered sugar on it, but they're very, very delicious for what they are. And they're cheap. They're really, really affordable at Cafe Beignet or at Café du Monde, wherever you go. But they're two very different textures between Café du Monde and Café Beignet. So I prefer the Café Beignet version, but I knew there were people in our group that really liked the Café du Monde ones more. But either way, you can't go wrong. Next, we walked to St. Louis Cemetery number 1, which is the oldest cemetery in New Orleans, though there was a cemetery that came before it, but it was later paved over with a new block of buildings on it. But that was all the way back in the 1700s, from what I understand. Now, we had reservations to tour the cemetery, and so we went to the visitor center, and they have a little museum in there about the trains that used to run along the area, because Basin Street, where the cemetery is located, originally used to be a large train station back in the 1910s and 1920s. We're here on Basin Street ready to check in for the cemetery tour, but there's a little surprise here. I've come over 2,500 miles and still followed by Cunard.
There's a first class ticket on this side.
There's a first class ticket?
Sticker.
Oh, sticker. Okay, first class sticker.
Fancy.
But anyway, we met up with our tour guide named Mary, and she took us into the cemetery, and we were able to walk around and see a lot of these old tombs and crypts. Now, there's a little bit of misinformation about the way people are buried in New Orleans. They say that they put them in these tombs and crypts because when it floods, the bodies would just pop out of the ground anyway. So by putting them into these tombs and crypts, that doesn't happen. That's not necessarily true. The city doesn't flood that often when it comes to like a massive thing like what happened with the levees breaking and anything like that. In actuality, they're buried this way because that's the way it's done in Spain and in some places in France. And Spain and France are the two countries that once owned and highly influenced New Orleans. So people are buried the European way here. And the way that these tombs and crypts work is there's basically at least one chamber where the deceased will go. even if it's a small one, it's a family investment. But that's the way it works. And when the previous person has broken down, they will then move the bones into a compartment that drops down into an area that is either at ground level or just below ground level. And they can put as many as dozens upon dozens, or even in some cases, depending on the size of the tomb or crypt, there could be 100 people in there. But in any case, we were able to see all these things. And St. Louis Cemetery number 1, being the oldest, is one of the more crowded ones. But there are still places for brand new tombs and crypts. The pyramid that you see belonged to Nicolas Cage. So he has his own right there and ready for him in New Orleans. And there are some tombs and crypts that look brand new, but might date back 100 or 200 years. And that's because they've been recently restored by the family that owns them, or people related to the family that owns them. And what's interesting is that it's not just family members who are interred in these tombs and crypts. Sometimes, if there is a close family friend, they can then be moved into one of the tombs or crypts if the family thinks it's okay. So it's really interesting how that works. And usually they'll put the names and, of course, the dates of their birth and death on the front of the tomb if they can. And the way that they prevent any kind of smell or anything coming off of the tombs or crypts is by sealing it up with concrete. So after a year has passed and let's say they need to put and move someone into that compartment, they will break open the seal of the concrete. And that's how they do it. It's really interesting to learn all that. And I do recommend that you take this tour. It's 45 minutes long, and I believe it cost us about $25. But it's the only way you can see this particular cemetery, the oldest one. Well, we're sitting here in Congo Square, resting. We just came back from the cemetery tour. That's St. Louis Cemetery number 1, which is currently the oldest cemetery in New Orleans. And unfortunately, they don't allow videoing, so I couldn't video the whole thing, but I did take a lot of pictures of it. And let me go ahead and reverse the camera. So that clearing right over there is part of Congo Square. So this is where the slaves would congregate after morning mass, and they would all just kind of sit here, socialize. They'd dance and play music and things, because Sundays was kind of their day of respite from their life, essentially. And I don't have too much information to speak on camera about Congo Square, but there's a lot of information about Congo Square. I just wanted to have it on camera. And then beyond it is Louis Armstrong Park, which we don't really have time to walk all the way through because we're trying to keep to a schedule. But just beyond the trees and the fence right there is the edge of the French Quarter. So yeah. It's not technically that hot today, and there is a little bit of a breeze, but I don't know. There's something about the humidity, something about the combination of the heat and the sun. I'm exhausted, and we still have a whole day of stuff to do. We had intended to walk around the park, but it was so warm that morning, and we had just gotten out of the cemetery, which was even warmer, that I just didn't have the energy to walk around the park. So we basically just entered the park, walked a straight line through it, and then left. Yeah, pretty big. There's a hourglass shaped lake that goes through there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Watch your step. But afterwards, we went to see the historic Voodoo Museum. I didn't film inside because it was very tight quarters and the owner was right there, and it just didn't feel like the right place to film. Plus, I wasn't sure what I would capture on video and whether or not YouTube would be okay with it. But nevertheless, it was really neat. We spoke to the owner, a very sweet lady, and I had purchased for myself something which she told me was called gris-gris. She told me how to pronounce it with a rolling R, gris-gris. And it's basically, this particular pouch has a specific blend of herbs in it, and it's yellow, and it signifies good luck. And so for men, you wear it on your right-hand side. So you put it in your pocket or a satchel or something on your right-hand side. For women, it's on the left. But it's really interesting, and I do recommend seeing the New Orleans Historic Voodoo Museum. And that was a really interesting place. After the Voodoo Museum, it was time for me, my father, and Chris. We had reservations at a place called the Court of Two Sisters. Now, what's really interesting is my very first job was at Disneyland Resort in Anaheim, California. And one of the places throughout my career in the park was I worked at a restaurant called the Blue Bayou. Maybe you've heard of it. It's the only restaurant located within the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. And the Blue Bayou is set in this kind of bayou atmosphere with a little garden a little courtyard garden that you would sit in right outside of a large house. And so what's interesting is that the Blue Bayou was inspired by the restaurant called the Court of Two Sisters. That's because Walt Disney, when he was building New Orleans Square, had sent himself and his Imagineers to New Orleans to study the architecture, the layout, and the environment of the French Quarter. And so when we go into the Court of Two Sisters, you can definitely feel the Blue Bayou atmosphere, even though it's purely daylight outside. But when you go into the courtyard, there's this beautiful vine that covers the whole overhead of the courtyard, which shades you from the sun. There's a couple of fountains, actually. There's live jazz music playing in the corner of the courtyard. It's just a beautiful place, and they had a really delicious Sunday brunch buffet that you could get. It had some amazing food. So I'm here at the Court of Two Sisters, which is a fancy restaurant here in the middle of the French Quarter on Royal Street. And let me show you what they got. This is for the breakfast brunch buffet. Glazed sweet potatoes, ribeye, duck à l'orange. We got creamed spinach, cornbread, pasta. We have catfish, fried catfish, bread pudding. This is just some of the many things they serve for the breakfast brunch. $36 per person for breakfast brunch, and it's all you can eat. Very much well worth it, and we're going to get some mimosas delivered to the table. So this is really great. Hey folks, Alex standing here on Barrack Street. Just wanted to give a quick shout out to people who've made this dream a reality. So anyway, thank you Ken Norse Nordelmeister. Thank you Martina, who is the mother of my friend Shiloh. Jeffrey Charles, Willow Tree, Adventures with the Stones, Adam Painter, Emmett the Sports Car 86, Peter Angelopoulos, Sarah Klenotic, William Walzenberg, Dino DeSantis, Nicolaus Boothman, and Aaron K4RNA. Thank you all so much. I can't tell you how much this has meant to me. Anyway, back to the show. We went to the Historic New Orleans Collection, which is a museum and archive center, which is also on Royal Street in the French Quarter. And basically, they're an organization which has documented and still documents the history of New Orleans. And it's really cool because one of their facilities, the one on Royal Street, is also a museum. So you walk in there and there's usually a couple of exhibits. I thought it would be a little bit bigger than it was, but it really wasn't that big, but it was an interesting exhibit nevertheless. It really talked about the founding of New Orleans and the history behind that. And from what I hear, they have a separate facility which is a massive library and archive of artifacts and things. And it's open to the public if you create like a free membership for yourself. You know, they have to keep track of who's going in there and what they're doing. But nevertheless, it's free to the public, I hear. I didn't go to that place because we didn't have the time, but we did see the little museum that they have on Royal Street. And it was really interesting. I was hoping to learn something new there, but the founding of New Orleans and all the people responsible for the creation of New Orleans and the French Quarter, I already kind of knew that going in. So I didn't learn anything new there. But if you aren't familiar with it, that's a great place to go. You learn so much about the French Quarter and how it was created. When we were done with the historic New Orleans collection, all the museums and things around the area were closed. Everything closed early at like 4 p.m. So really the only thing that was left to do was to walk around, maybe window shop, you know, maybe get some snacks, although we were still very full from brunch, so we didn't really eat anything. But we met back up with Shiloh and Martina, and we decided to take a quick rest at the hotel, and then we went back out for an evening walk. And you guys might remember I did a live stream that day. So that was the first live stream I did in New Orleans. And it was really interesting. We went all the way to Algiers Point, which is on the other side of the Mississippi River. It's still part of the city of New Orleans, but it's a neighborhood on the opposite side of the river. All right, so we're at Algiers, which is which is a neighborhood on the other side of the Mississippi River, but it is still part of New Orleans. And we came here to get a view of the sunset because, you know, you get a great view of the city for sunset, but there's not much else to do here. We got to figure out if we missed the last ferry to get back, or how to get back, because I'm pretty sure I read that the last ferry was at 7.
That's what,
7:00 something. But that was it for day 3 in New Orleans, but we still had a lot more to see, so stay tuned for the next vlog featuring day 4. Thank you everyone for watching. If you like this video, please give it a like, subscribe for more content, and leave me a comment. Do you have any questions or want to share any stories? Thanks again, and see you later.